Good evening. Thank you for joining us. And we're recording this on the 18th of November. And if you're watching in the future times, we in the state of Washington have had kind of a lot of change happen over the last couple of days. And so this week's just been really full. And so my notes that I will be posting later to our email group, um, they will not be as synthesized as normal, as I have been doing. And so it's going to be a lot of just straight quotes and citations. So I'm not stealing content from anybody. But the way that I've been preparing my notes, I just haven't been able to synthesize the content as much. So please forgive me. If that was something that you were looking for, but there's a lot of interesting stuff as we read
Yeah.
through Genesis 16 through 19 today. And one of the things that we're looking at as we are walking through the life of Abraham, we're looking at how his life is contrasted to the life of Lot in this section in particular. Remember last week, Abraham and Lot went up to the mountain, and because their shepherds were in conflict, and then Abraham said to Lot, "You can choose whichever side you prefer," and Lot went down to the area of Sodom and Gomorrah and decided to make that his base of operations. And so um, that leads to some conflict in this passage. Some of the tension of this passage is around Lot's decision in the city of Sodom. But then also, we're going to look at some of the tension around trusting the Lord's plan and his promises. And so there are going to be some, right off the bat in chapter 16, we'll see some conflict there. So there's a good amount of ground to cover tonight. And so we're going to just start 16 verse 1. It says, now Sarai, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now she knows she is pregnant. She despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your slave is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. Now, we've seen polygamy in the Genesis account, in some of the lines that were not part of the elect line. And when we look at this story, we are seeing that a situation that is very bizarre to our cultural context. It's not something that we would probably consider to do in our in the Christian world and the American culture at large, even. But in Israel and in most of the ancient world, this monogamy was practiced. Uh, there were occasions where people would have multiple spouses, and usually it came down to whether or not the first wife was able to conceive. And so the plan here that Sarai is coming up with is not unusual in the ancient world. It was not the norm, but it was not like totally out of left field. But the challenge for us as readers is we know that God has promised to bring a son into their family. God has promised to make Abraham a great nation. And so what's happening here is Sarai has her own ideas on how that's going to come about. And there are some interesting parallels here between Abram and Sarai and Adam and Eve. because there is a idea of like, we want to make God's plan happen is what Sarah's looking for. The temptation to the woman from the serpent was, you can be like God. And so even some of the language of like Sarai took her servant and gave her to her husband, and her husband slept with her, like the parallels of like from the wife to the husband, these decisions to try to make their own plan happen. So there's some of those echoes happening. When we think about the larger context of what's happening in the story, Hagar is Egyptian. And if we remember last week, Abram and Sarai went to Egypt to escape a famine. And so that's where Hagar even came into the picture when they left the land of promise, and told the Egyptian Pharaoh that Sarai and Abram were brother and sister. And so there are um, several ramifications that are coming about because of going to Egypt, because of disobedience, because of trying to make God's plan work. And so here it comes to fulfillment where Sarai is trying to make God's plan work. And as we think through what's happening, rarely ever do we see when we try to make our plans work, do they come about. And in fact, Sarai's language here is even blaming God. The Lord has kept me from conceiving. Like, it's God's fault that I haven't conceived. So I'm going to solve God's problem for him, is kind of what she is doing. And as we work through some of the personal like thoughts and applications where we've been waiting on the Lord for something, we look at a story like this and we should just, first of all, just say like, all right, don't force God's hand. Don't force God's calendar, or don't try to get him on your schedule. There is a value in waiting that is where God begins to change and transform us. It's not fun to wait, but we need to learn to wait. And so Abram says, okay, this is a thing that is culturally something that I've heard of. We can do this. And so he goes along with Sarai's plan, and Hagar conceives. And so Hagar is pregnant, and she starts to be mean to Sarai. And so Sarah's like, Abram, this is your fault. So she's shifting the blame away, again, echoing the tension around Genesis 3, where they shifted the blame from each other. And so here she's telling Abram, this is your fault that my servant is pregnant, even though it was her idea. And then Abram's like, look, this was your idea, so you're responsible for this. And we see that Sarai begins to mistreat Hagar. And what that could be is like physically beating her. It could be verbally abusing her. Some kind of abuse is happening to Hagar. And so Hagar runs away. So let's pick up in verse 7 to see what happens. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. She gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her, you are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. This is why the well was called Be'er Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. And so Hagar is running away from the abuse that she is receiving from Sarai, and she's running back to Egypt. That's what the geographical points are telling us. She's running back to Egypt, to the land of her family and her heritage. And the angel encounters her along the way, the angel of the Lord. And this is what we would call a theophany, an appearance of God. And the angel of the Lord terminology is something that we should pay attention to, because there are times where an angel, the word just means messenger. So there are times where there are messengers that go and speak on behalf of the Lord. But then there are other times where we see the angel of the Lord is an encounter with God. And this is one of those times, as we see Hagar is talking to the angel of the Lord as God, and not just as an angel. Also, it might have been a weird experience, because she might not have known that it was an angel right away, as this person she encounters on the road. But the giveaway is that this person knew her name, Hagar, slave of Sarai. So there is a divine knowledge of what's going on here. And so that probably got her attention. And by the end of the encounter, she realizes who it is, and that's the angel of the Lord. And there's something interesting that happens in this whole encounter as well, where she actually names God. And so the angel of the Lord gives Hagar a name to give to her son Ishmael, but then also she names the Lord as the Lord who sees me. So El Roy. And that's a significant point, because this is the only time in the Bible where we actually see an individual naming God. Usually God will give us a name or a description of himself in these kinds of encounters, but here she's going the other way. And so the angel tells her to return and go back to Sarai, partly because she knows, the angel knows that this is Abram's son, and he's going to bless this son. This son, while not the son of the promise, will still receive blessing from God, will still become a nation. And the way that it's the angel talks about the child like a wild donkey of a man. This is a way, we think of the donkey as like the jackass and like the stubborn, and like there's hints here, but it's also like the wanderer. The donkey in this time is kind of a traveling animal that wasn't locked down into one place. And so it's a picture of a nomadic nation, people on the move. And so there will be conflict. There will be disagreements between nations that come from Ishmael's line and Abram's line in Isaac. That's going to happen. That's all indicated here in this promise. But it's also all part of God's blessing for Ishmael. And so when she goes back to Sarai, she's going knowing that this child is special. This child will be blessed. This is not the last time that Hagar and her child will flee from the estate of Abram. But even then, and we'll see that in the coming week, even then, when they flee, God still is protecting Hagar and Ishmael. And so there are some interesting just little notes here that when we look to the history of the peoples in the Middle East and in the land of Canaan, Ishmael is really the father of the Arabic people that become Muslim and practice Islam. And so that conflict even now between Israel and the Islamic states around Israel, it's just interesting that it's all talked about way back in Genesis chapter 16. And I do love this declaration. I just want to make sure that we have it clear here that You are the God who sees me. She's saying, you are El Roy. El is God and sees me, or the God who sees is that Roy is sees. Um, and what a great reminder for us. I know this week has just been crazy, and we probably all have moments where we have just like felt hopeless over the last several months. But I see here Hagar is in a hopeless situation, and God encounters her, and she recognizes that he sees her. And what a great reminder for us that God is still seeing us even now. And so while the relationship between Sarai and Hagar is probably never going to be a healthy relationship, they know that God sees, we can know that God sees Hagar even in that situation. All right, let's keep going. Verse 17. So Abram has tried to make his own plan and didn't go well. And he was 86 years old when all of this went down. And so verse 17:1, when Abraham was 99 years old. So 13 years have gone by since that moment. The Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me faithfully and be blameless. Then I will make my covenant between me and you and will greatly increase your numbers. Abram fell face down and said to him, as for me, this is my covenant with you. And God said to him, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. No longer will you be called Abram. Your name will be Abraham. For I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you very fruitful. I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generations to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you now reside as a foreigner, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and I will be their God. Then God said to Abraham, as for you, you must keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, for the generations to come. This is my covenant with you and your descendants after you, the covenant you are to keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You are to undergo circumcision, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and you. For the generations to come, every male among you who is 8 days old must be circumcised, including those born in your household or bought with money from a foreigner, those who are not your offspring. Whether born in your household or bought with your money, they must be circumcised. My covenant in your flesh is to be an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who has not been circumcised in the flesh will be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. So 13 years goes by between the Hagar and Ishmael situation, and still no child has been born. And so talk about waiting. Abraham is now 99, and he is probably pretty frustrated. I think we could all say that would be a safe assumption. But when the Lord shows up to him and says, I will make this covenant with you, like the Lord has already made a covenant with Abraham, and we've seen him pass through the animals that were cut in half last week. Like God is doing the heavy lifting of this covenant. And now in this chapter 17, we're seeing that God is saying to Abraham, I want to give to you the sign of the covenant. And this each covenant has these different sealings, these different signs. Noah's sign of the covenant was the rainbow, and here we have the sign of circumcision as the covenant for Abraham's covenant. And so when we see God changing Abraham's name from exalted father to father of the horde, as like the literal translation. So father of the multitude. And so he's doing something new in Abraham's life. And so it may not feel like a significant change for Abraham, but for us, it is a thing of note. Right now, he was just the exalted father without any children. And now he's Abraham, the father of the multitude. And that's tied to this covenant of the everlasting promise that God would make great nations, not just one nation, but nations and kings come from Abraham's promised child as part of this covenant. And the covenant sign of circumcision, like this is something that, was common. Circumcision was common in the ancient world. And so it wasn't like something that Abraham had never heard of before, but it was usually tied to a rite of passage of a boy entering into manhood. Here, the novelty of the covenant with Abraham's descendants is the command that this be done in infancy at 8 days old. Why 8 days? We don't know. There's people who have theories and like about blood clotting and all kinds of different stuff, but probably the easiest way to be able to say why 8 days is because you'll at least have one Sabbath in between those days. We don't have the Sabbath law yet, but we do have the order of creation of on the seventh day you rested, and so you won't necessarily force on a Sabbath to just so you give some time for a family to observe a Sabbath after the baby's born. The other part of this as well as like tying in with circumcision is the like as a sign for a child to be a part of the covenant, as like from birth you're a part of the family of God. That's part of this tie-in. And so like church traditions that do like infant baptism, the Bible ties in the New Testament does tie circumcision to baptism as the sign for believers who are entering into the faith. And so knowing that circumcision and baptism are connected in the New Testament, it makes sense why some church traditions would say like, well, then we should also baptize infants because that's who we circumcise infants. If those are the transverse properties of the of these signs of the covenant. And the real key, even throughout the Old Testament, is not just that you are marked on your flesh, but that your heart is transformed. And so those churches that are holding to the principle of infant baptism, like they're not heretics. The challenge is that a lot of people probably just don't think about it. But fundamentally, they are following the pattern of Abraham and his descendants into the new faith. Our church does child dedication, and because we believe that we want to make sure that baptism is tied to confession of faith, and that's our tradition. And so, but when we look at some of these promises here as well in this covenant, like, he's going to make sure that every male is circumcised in the whole household. That's part of the sign. But the promises of this covenant is that the land where Abraham is currently an alien, he does not own the land. He's still just present. He's got flocks, he's got people, but he is not an owner. God is saying this land will be your descendants' land. And so this is a big promise. And Abraham probably thought, there's no way I could ever see this come about. I don't know how this is going to happen, but God is making a way. We saw last week, Abraham was told by God that his descendants would actually leave the land for 400 years and it would be mistreated. And so God is like giving him these page turns of revelation. Like you don't get it all at one time. Like over time, I'm going to show you the plan. And so this new understanding is all this land going to be given to your descendants forever. And so we are excited for Abraham's like, all right, cool. This is good news. And new name, all this good stuff. God's not done yet. Verse 15, God said to Abraham, as for Sarai, your wife, you are no longer to call her Sarai. Her name will be Sarah. I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. I will bless her so that she will be the mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. Abraham fell face down. He laughed and said to himself, will a son be born to a man 100 years old? Will Sarah bear a child at the age of 90? And Abraham said to God, if only Ishmael might live under your blessing. Then God said, yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his number. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. When he had finished speaking with Abraham, God went up from him. On that very day, Abraham took his son Ishmael and all those born in his household and bought with his money every male in his household and circumcised them as God told him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and his son Ishmael was 13. Abraham and his son Ishmael were both circumcised on that very day, and every male in Abraham's household, including those born in the household or bought from a foreigner, was circumcised with him. So Sarai also gets a new name, and Sarai means princess, and Sarah means princess. So the key for us is like it's not that wow, what a great huge change. The Sarai is Eastern. It's like it is from the land of Ur. That's the language group. Sarah is much more uh, Western. It is a more Canaan land, Hebrew understanding of the word. And so like that is the key, is like she's leaving behind the old ways. God is changing her into somebody new. And so her name is now Sarah. And so I I read the Bible and I see things that are just kind of funny. Here, God told Abraham that his wife will have a new name. Sarah was not a part of that conversation, and so when he came back from meeting with the Lord and just said, "Hey, Sarah," and she's like, "Who's Sarah?" That's you, Sarah. You're Sarah. God said so. I just think that would be a funny interaction. So she has a new name, and she's going to be the mother of nations, just like Abraham is going to be the father of nations. And Abraham's response to this is to laugh. He gets down on his face, and you could read it and just say, "Oh, he's laughing so hard he can't even stand," but it could be like he is down in a way worshiping the Lord, but laughing and saying, "This is just this is too much. Really, you're going to do this? I'm 100, my wife is 90. This is impossible." And so he laughs. And God says, "No, this is exactly what's going to happen." And the name Isaac means he laughs. And so God says, "You're laughing, but you're going to name your kid, he laughs. And it's going to be, you're going to see this is going to happen in a year." And while Abraham has just been told to go and circumcise himself and his entire household, and now God is saying, "And then you will have a child." Um, it's just an interesting juxtaposition of commandment and promise, because I mean Abraham knows how babies are made, and so this is the sign of circumcision as a promise that God's family and his continuation of the line of the promise, but it's also tied to the reproductive organ, and so it's a sign for the men of the people of Israel, that their families are to be a part of God's covenant. And so none of this is on accident. God is being very intentional in all of this. And so this conversation with Sarai or with Abraham happens, and he goes back down to his whole household of people, and they have this circumcision party. And his son was 13. I have a 14-year-old, and I'm just amazed that all these people were willing to go along with this. So, and if you've been a part of Creekside for a while, I've said this before, but for years, every time circumcision was something that was a part of the next week's passage, like our previous lead pastor was gone those weeks, which was really convenient. So I've preached a lot about circumcision over my 16 years here at Creekside. So let's go to chapter 18. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance to his tents in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under the tree. Let me get you something to eat so that you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 seahs of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked. "There in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself and thought, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." Now, these 3 visitors are an interesting encounter here. And it could be easy to say Trinity right here. But we have to be careful not to just read in Trinity into Old Testament passages. And there are some distinctions that happen in the text as we continue on to show that this probably is not a Trinitarian encounter, but it is a theophany, a God encounter, and then God with 2 angels. So the Lord with 2 of his entourage. And so here we are seeing some of the key elements of hospitality in Middle Eastern culture. So as a man of some means, Abraham had a big tent, and the tent flaps would have been lifted up and like would have created shade during the heat of the day. And so that's where he's at. And he sees these guys coming along, and so he runs out to meet them. So his running out to meet them is an indication about his generosity, that he wants to be hospitable to people. He does not yet know who these people are. He just sees them, and he's trying to be hospitable. And part of that as well is like, get the finest flour, get the best calf. Like, I'm going to prepare a meal for them. He totally undersells it. "Let me get a little bit of water. Let me wash your feet." But he's like, "I'm going to get you a meal. It's going to be great. Just stay here." And so he's trying to honor these guests and be hospitable to them. And so Sarah, who is preparing these things, like the men are speaking with Abraham, and says like, they say, "Where's your wife?" And she's preparing the thing. It's like, well, next year she's going to have a baby. And Sarah laughs to herself. This is all in her mind. And like, she's not laughing out loud. She's laughing and thinking, can this really happen? Am I going to have the pleasure of having a child at this old age? This is hilarious. And the angel of the Lord says, or one of the visitors says, "Why is Sarah laughing?" Which, getting called out for laughing in your mind is a key indicator that this is not just another visitor. This is somebody special. Something unique is happening here. And so the Lord calls her out on it. So last week, or prior to this, God says to Abraham, "You're going to have a son, you're going to name him Isaac," which means he laughs. Here, Sarah hears the promise of a son in the next year, and she laughs. And so there's a theme here going on. Like, this is a surprise. this baby is a delight to all who will see Sarah and Abraham with this kid. And, part of the way I read this too is like the Lord is saying this is going to happen, and he's going to get the last laugh on this, because a 90-year-old woman with a baby, that's going to take a lot of grace and a lot of empowerment by the Spirit of God to keep up with that baby. So this is a great and wonderful promise. Nothing is impossible for the Lord. We still do not see it happening, but we are told it will happen. So the story continues, though, in verse 16. When the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him, so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised." Then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." The men turned away and went towards Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from me to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will you judge all the earth to do to the right?" The Lord said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Then Abraham spoke up again. "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5 people? If I find 45 there," he said, "I will not destroy it." Once again he spoke up. "What if there are only 40 are found here?" He said, "For the sake of 40, I will not do it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there?" He answered, "I will not do it if I find 30 there." Abraham said, "Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there?" He said, "For the sake of 20, I will not destroy it." Then he said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there?" He answered, "For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it." Then the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham. He left, and Abraham returned home. So this is a interesting time where where Abraham is negotiating with God. So it's an interesting story, but also part of what's going on here is Abraham is being invited into the counsel of the Lord. He is God's friend. In Scripture, we see they have a walking with God type relationship, and so he is bringing Abraham into the conversation of the divine counsel. He's treating him not unlike the prophets that we read about in the Old Testament, where he's revealing his plan. And, this is new to this detail. We see in Noah, like God tells Noah how to, like, I'm going to preserve humanity through your family. But here, Abraham is getting a rationale. He's getting the thought. He's told that the outcry of Sodom has come and reached the Lord. And so there's all kinds of stuff that we're seeing in their conversation. And so when we look at the prophets, we see like Jeremiah and Ezekiel are talking and interacting with God and trying to come to understanding of what God is doing. And so here we see God is doing that with Abraham. The negotiation piece is also interesting because he's bargaining from 50 to 10. And Abraham is aware that he is just a person. He is just a mere mortal, but he's trying to to defend people, to say like, if we are going to face judgment, then the wicked and the righteous should not be treated the same. And so he's appealing to justice. He's appealing to fairness, and so he's trying to get to a number that is manageable. And one of the reasons for that is because his nephew Lot lives down in that region, and so he's possibly trying to just protect his family. And we would too, right? We would all do this. And God is gracious in this conversation with Abraham. He doesn't just say, "Forget you, Abraham. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm God." But no, he says, "I will hear your request." And he keeps going down with him in the number. If there are 10 people, I'll totally save the city, no problem. The problem is that there isn't 10 people. We'll see. But this is the second time that Abraham has intervened on Sodom's behalf. The first time, the kings in the east were coming to war with the kings of the west, and Abraham came with his 318 mighty men and defeated those kings. So that was a physical battle. Here we see a verbal interaction as a way to intervene for the people of Sodom, to try to help and preserve the righteous. So what happens? Verse 19. And I'm going to read the most of this, so it's a long section, so just heads up. The two angels arrived at Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of the city. When he saw them, he got up to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "please turn aside to your servant's house. You can wash your feet and spend the night, and then go on your way early in the morning." "No," they answered, "we will spend the night in the square." But he insisted so strongly that they did go with him and entered his house. He prepared a meal for them, baking bread without yeast, and they ate. Before they had gone to bed, all the men from every part of the city of Sodom, both young and old, surrounded the house. They called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we can have sex with them." Lot went outside to meet them and shut the door behind him and said, "No, my friends, don't do this wicked thing. Look, I have two daughters who have never slept with a man. Let me bring them out to you, and you can do what you like with them. But don't do anything to these men, for they have come under the protection of my roof." "Get out of our way," they replied. "This fellow came here as a foreigner, and now he wants to play the judge. We'll treat you worse than them." They kept bringing pressure on Lot and moved forward to break down the door. But the men inside reached out and pulled Lot back into the house and shut the door. Then they struck the men who were at the door of the house, young and old, with blindness so that they could not find the door. The two men said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, "Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city." But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and his two daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives. Don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." But Lot said to them, "No, my lords, please. Your servant has found favor in your eyes, and you have shown great kindness to me in sparing my life. But I can't flee to the mountains. The disaster will overtake me, and I'll die. Look, here is a town near enough to run to, and it is small. Let me flee to it. It is very small, isn't it? Then my life will be spared." He said to him, the angel said to him, "Very well, I will grant this request too. I will not overthrow the town you speak of, but flee there quickly, because I cannot do anything until you reach it. That is why the town is called Zoar." By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. Early the next morning, Abraham got up, returned to the place where he had stood before the Lord. He looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, toward the land of the plain, and he saw dense smoke rising from the land, like smoke from a furnace. So when God destroyed the cities of the plain, he remembered Abraham, and he brought Lot out of the catastrophe that overthrew the cities where Lot had lived. So this is a intense story, and it's full of tragedy. There's a contrast between Lot and Abraham here in their hospitality. Abraham is abundantly hospitable. Lot is welcoming, but he's like, wash your feet. I'm going to make you some unleavened bread, and then you can leave. He's still extending hospitality, but there is a contrast between the way that they are operating in hospitality. Abraham is at the gates, like the doors of his own tent. Lot is at the gates of the city, which was an important place for people to gather, and like it was a very cultural, a hub of culture there. So that's an indication to us that Lot is probably a part of Sodom. Is intertwined into this city in a significant way already. The sin of Sodom here, we have the behavior of these men. So he brings them into his house, and these angels, he brings them into his house. They are under his protection, and then the people of Sodom are trying to get these men out of Lot's house so that they could rape them, which is bizarre. Like, this is a strange thing. One of the things that we have to reconcile with is when we think about like Sodom and Gomorrah, like it's very easy just to say like the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is homosexuality. And when we read the Bible, though, we do see that there is more to it than homosexuality. What the men of Sodom are doing here is wrong, but there is more to the city of Sodom than just homosexuality. That is abhorrent to the Lord, because it's also, the prophets will talk about how they mistreated the poor and the vulnerable. And even here, these two men who are angels, they're willing to stay in the town square. They are putting themselves in an arena of vulnerability, perhaps to see and to test the people of Sodom. And they fail the test. They fail terribly. And they want to abuse and dominate and exert their power over these foreigners, these aliens, these people who are not a part of the city. And that is part of the abhorrent nature of the city, is more than just the terrible act that they want to do. It's their heart towards foreigners. It's their heart towards people who are not a part of the city. And so Lot is trying to protect them, and then he offers his own daughters, which is also heartbreaking. This is just so many heartbreaking things, one after the other after the other. And if you remember, Abraham intervening for the city, saying, if there's 10 people who are righteous, will you save the city? We don't even really see any people that are righteous.
Right.
Even Lot, he's offering to do a terrible trade. And by the grace of God, the angels spare Lot for Abraham's sake. Because as it said there in the last thing, the Lord remembered Abraham. And so whereas like Noah was spared because of Noah's righteousness, Lot is spared because of Abraham's righteousness. And so they try to get out of the city. The sons-in-law, even in the previous stories, like Abraham and Sarah, they laughed at God, saying, this is impossible. The sons-in-law laugh at God and say, Lot, you're crazy. This isn't going to happen. And their laughter leads them to not go with Lot, to not trust that what God is saying in this moment. And they are destroyed as sulfur and brimstone fall on the city. And most likely, this is probably some kind of volcanic activity, like where like lava is spewing up in the air and coming back down and destroying the city. The angels are orchestrating this. However, it all worked out. We don't know exactly. They're just told to leave and don't look back. And Lot's wife does look back, turns to salt. And this is down by the Dead Sea. And there are still, like, if on like really windy days, this Dead Sea is so salty that like the wind will blow like basically salt drifts. And so you could see pillars of salt coming up off of the Dead Sea, in even now. And so where this land was once, like Lot saw it and it was beautiful and lush, a good place for shepherding and for flocks. And now, like, you look at the area around the Dead Sea and it is dead. It's been destroyed. And so this story is a heartbreaking story. And just thinking about Abraham, who was praying and interceding with God for the people of Sodom, and if there are 10, and he wakes up that next morning and he sees the smoke and the fire. And like, what does he think has happened? Is his nephew gone? Like, what is going on? I remember, like when like 9/11, it happened when I was a junior in college, and I remember watching the smoke in the out of the two towers before they fell to the ground. And 2 summers ago, my daughter and we went to New York, and we went to the 9/11 memorial, and the pictures, like just seeing the destruction of people, and the loss of life, it's heartbreaking. And so, like, this is a heartbreaking moment in Abraham, and we are not given any great resolution for Abraham. He sees it and it's gone. So the Lord is telling Abraham there were not 10 righteous people in this city. But now Lot and his daughters are alone because their betrothed, their his sons-in-law, they stayed in the city. So they're alone. So we got one more little section to read, and then we will do some question and response. So verse 30, Lot and his 2 daughters left Zoar and settled in the mountains, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar, which is understandable if you think like the last city he was in, not great. So now he's afraid to stay in Zoar. He and his 2 daughters lived in a cave. One day, the older daughter said to the younger, "Our father is old, and there is no man around here to give us children, as is the custom all over the earth. Let's get our father to drink wine and then sleep with him and preserve our family line through our father." That night, they got their father to drink wine, and the older daughter went in and slept with him. He was not aware of it when she lay down or when she got up. The next day, the older daughter said to the younger daughter, "Last night I slept with my father. Let's get him to drink wine again. Tonight you will go in and sleep with him so we can preserve our family line through our father." So they got their father to drink wine that night also, and the younger daughter went in and slept with him. Again, he was not aware of it when she lay down and when she got up. So both of Lot's daughters became pregnant by their father. The older daughter had a son and named him Moab, and he is the father of the Moabites of today. The younger daughter also had a son, and she named him Ben-Ami, and he is the father of the Ammonites today. And so everybody's in self-preservation mode in this section. Lot is trying to preserve what little family he has left. And so, like, he probably lost everything in the destruction, right? He had flocks, he had household servants, he had like enough people to like create conflict between him and Abraham, and now he's lost everything. And so he leaves Zoar, and they are living in a cave. He's just trying to stay alive, and his daughters recognize their hopeless situation. Like, we're not going to be able to have any kids, and our family line will end. So they come up with this plan, and this is not a good plan, to get pregnant by their dad. And when you read stories like this, like we should just say, like, this is weird and this is not great. It is also a descriptive text. It is not a prescriptive text. Like this is what happened. It's not what we should do ever. So keep that in mind. Sometimes people read stories in the Bible, even multiple wife stories like polygamy. Nowhere in the Bible is polygamy ever told. It's like, this is a really great idea. And so here, this idea is hatched and the plot is carried out. And so they are pregnant, their kids become nations, Moab and the Ammonites. And those two families become great sources of conflict for the people of Israel in the future. And so we have in this section, we've introduced Ishmael and his family. We've introduced Moab and the Ammonites. And so we have the building of warring nations that are going to kind of be on the outside of the land of the promise for the people of Israel in the future. And so part of what the writer is doing is helping us to see like the people groups that are facing the people of Israel as they are getting into the promised land. Like these people groups are all connected to the family of Israel, and the conflict comes back down to these ancient history that is a part of the family as well. So, yeah. So, like I said in the beginning, this week was a little disjointed as far as my time with this with different things as responding to what's going on in our region, and so my notes are not as synthesized, but I would love to talk about questions, thoughts. This was a bunch of weird stories, but putting them all together, we kind of get a picture of God's promise and the line of promise with Abraham, and then also God's judgment and rejection of disobedience and wickedness in the life of Sodom and the family of Lot. So yeah, any questions or thoughts?
I have one.
Uh-huh.
Lot's wife looked back. What
Right.
did she look back at?
Well, she was told not to look back at the city.
She was told not to?
Yeah, the angels say don't even look back.
Oh, okay. I missed that.
Yeah. So flee for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Is what the
Was there any reason for them not to look back?
No, we're not given a specific reason, but it's probably just because like looking back is a would be
Temptation.
regret and sorrow over what's going on.
Yeah.
It might even just slow you down.
Well, it slowed her down.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. Slowed her down real good. So
But I wondered if there was some specific thing that I missed in there. So I was just curious.
no, we're not given a specific reason to not look back. We're just told don't look back.
Okay.
So
Well, I've got a question.
yes.
Do you think maybe some of her family got left there and she looked back and thought, oh my gosh.
Yeah, her sons-in-law
regrets.
are in the city, so that's for sure
Yeah.
some family. They are also Lot's whole household of like servants. They're probably there.
Yeah, they're all
But yeah, there is a relational
Yeah.
loss that's happening in this event. So yeah, sometimes we read through stories like this, and we don't take time to think about the human cost.
Yeah.
And like we should slow down. Like I grew up with all these stories on flannel graph, like except for the people in the town square, like demanding the angels to have their way with them. But like I remember vividly a pillar of salt flannel graph of this woman just turned into salt.
Yeah.
And we can make these stories just like these myths that like, oh, this is just an interesting story, but there's a human cost to all of this. And so we should like read this with sorrow. Like this, this didn't need to happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah. when I say this didn't mean to need to happen, like I'm just talking about human wickedness, not God's righteousness and not God's judgment. Like that's like people's wickedness leads to these things is what I'm trying to say. So
Yeah.
So Jason, this is kind of a stretch, my question,
mhm.
but when the angels of the Lord came to Lot and he provided them with unleavened bread, one thing that just struck me with that is Passover, you eat unleavened bread. When Christ did the Last Supper, they ate unleavened bread. So it is like during that time, uh, was there a significance behind unleavened bread, or was it just what he had at the time? I mean, that's a weird question to ask, but it like just seeing like these different points in history where this was offered, to me, there's got to be some significance where this came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the contrast here, so unleavened bread does become significant in the Exodus event. The contrast here in Genesis is more about the hospitality between Abraham and Lot.
Okay.
So Abraham is like, I'm going to make you the best bread with the best flour, like nice brioche style rolls. Like that's what he's making for the guests. Lot is like, I'm just going to make you something real quick. Because that's what
Okay.
unleavened bread is. It's bread that didn't have time to rise. And so like why they eat unleavened bread at Passover is because they are instructed, and we'll get to this in Exodus, they're instructed to eat with their belts on and like their shoes on and ready to go. And so make this stuff real quick because you're going to get out of here tonight. And so like it's a quick meal as opposed to Abraham's like slow relational meal that he's providing for the people, his visitors. So, and there's an
Okay.
echo in that Abraham story to hospitality in Genesis 13:2. It says, "Be hospitable towards strangers, because in doing so, some have entertained angels without even knowing it." And that's what he's talking about. He's talking about this story in entertaining angels. Like, be hospitable, because you don't know who these people might be that you are serving, who are right in front of you.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, but that like I love, Jay, that you're like seeing those kinds of connections, because like when we are reading the scriptures, like we want to like pay attention to those little details and ask questions like, what is this? Like, is this a thing? That's a good question to ask.
Thanks.
And not everything is a thing. Like not everything is going to lead to the same conclusions that we think it's going to make, but
Yeah.
it's good to ask,
Yeah.
is this a thing? So
But Jason, in the New Testament, don't they talk about yeast being like sin or something?
yeah.
Representative of sin.
Who was asking that? Was that you, Chris?
Chris Wallace.
Yeah, sorry. I have all of y'all up on this top bar here, and it didn't show up as Chris. So I was like, who's asking? Yeah, so Jesus talks about the yeast of the Pharisees. And so in that explanation, he's talking about how yeast works its way into the dough. You knead it. And you can't remove the yeast from the dough once it's kneaded in.
Once it's in, yeah.
And so like the point that Jesus is making is like, yeast is a small thing, but it works its way into everything. So not all yeast is sin, and not all bread with yeast is sinful, but they are saying like, think through, what is yeast? What is yeast? It is a living thing that works its way through everything. And that is the way that we could think about our own sin as well, is like, this is a thing that works its way into all parts of our heart. And if we're not careful, like it'll infiltrate and we won't even know what's going on. And so that's part of the Passover, is actually like getting rid of all the yeast in your house. Like that tradition is developed to like get rid of all the yeast as an annual reminder to just say, starting over, like getting all this stuff out. We're starting a new sourdough starter, like all the people in quarantine did this last March. So
What?
yeah. Did that answer your question, Chris? I feel like
Yeah. I just remember the lesson on yeast, and I wondered if there was some kind of it's not really related to this story at all.
well, it's not that it's not related at all. Like there are echoes, there are things that we should like notice, like
Yeah,
when we
correlate them.
when we think about bread, oh man, I have one of my favorite books is actually at my house. It's called it's a great resource. My mother-in-law got it for me for Christmas one year, and it was like the best gift ever. It's called the Dictionary of Biblical Imagery. And so it has like all kinds of different articles like yeast. And you do a study of yeast in the Bible and like what is the imagery associated with yeast. My favorite entry is vomit. And so it's got a whole bunch of stuff about vomit throughout the whole Bible. And it's just so good. It's great. So yeah.
You and I
Because
have
vomit comes up
different-
a lot. And like I've said many times on a Sunday morning, you can take a boy out of middle school, but you can't take middle school out of the boy. So that was the first thing I looked for. What's this say about vomit? So
Jason, I have
Yes.
a couple of questions.
uh-huh.
So going back, you just mentioned a few minutes ago about Genesis 13 and, entertain strangers because you never know if
Yeah.
it's been.
That's Hebrews 13.
What's that?
That's Hebrews 13.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hebrews.
All right.
I was wondering if in chapter 18, where it just seems that Abraham, or I guess the question is, do you think that he knew who those three visitors were? Because he bowed low to the ground. He just came running out of the tent and bowed low to the ground. So it just made me wonder if he did know who they were. And then something that ties into that, just that little passage. I also thought it was interesting, and I'm not sure if it says anything further about Abraham, but what he said he was going to do and what he actually did seemed a little at odds to me. So he told the strangers, let a little bit of water be brought. You can wash your feet, and you rest under the tree, and I'm going to get you something to eat, and then you can be. So it made it sound like he was just going to bring him all the stuff. And then he went running back into the tent and said, Sarah, quick, make the bread. And he, gave the calf to the servant and said, here, fix this, So he's got all these people running around doing this stuff where initially it kind of sounded like, oh, he was going to be Mr. Hospitable,
Right.
I don't know.
So to answer the first question, did Abraham know who these visitors were? So to answer definitively, maybe. Like he's had encounters with God. Like God has appeared to him. So maybe he recognized the Lord from a distance. But the way we're introduced to this event is Abraham looked up and saw three men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance to meet them and bowed to the ground. So he saw them, and we don't know how far away they were. We don't know, but he saw them. He's only had encounter with the Lord. So it may have been like, okay, that's the Lord. I don't know who these other two guys are, but I know that guy. And so, so that might be what's going on. That might be why he bowed down. It might just be he's humbling himself before a guest. There's a lot of things we don't know for sure here, but maybe he knew who the Lord was. As far as the nature of his hospitality is, he's under promising and over delivering. Like he's saying, let me just do a few things for you, and then went above and beyond, which is a huge aspect of Middle Eastern hospitality. And when I was in Egypt, when I was in Turkey, I was blown away by the hospitality of the Muslim people. And this is very tied to their culture. Like we sat down and had meals with people, and it was like, let me just make you something real quick. It was this huge spread of food. It's like, what on earth? How are we going to eat all this? Like, this is part of the way that people are in these cultures. And so they're going to under promise and over deliver all the time. And so that's probably part of what Abraham is doing. He's like, I don't want, you're not putting me out, but like, and then it's like hustling behind the scenes in the tent, like, we got a lot of things to do, guys. So, yeah. And Sarah's probably still thinking like, why is he still calling me Sarah? I don't know. My name is Sarai. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing. I think that's funny to me. So, because if I came home and told my wife, Kathy, like, hey, your name is now Kathy with a C, like her name, like she might not really notice it, but I would know, like, I'm spelling your name differently now. So, because you're Kathy with a C, right? Yeah. Yeah. Like, it's not a huge change between Sarai and Sarah, but it's like Abraham knows.
No.
So,
Okay,
all
so
right.
now I've got a question. This is Carrie.
Carrie, yes.
If you have a minute, I'm still reeling from the last portion. When Lot is going to give his daughters over to these people,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
God says, "Oh, hurry up and get out of there." You would think God would be like, "Whoa, wait a minute. Why would you do that to your children?"
Yeah.
Women weren't important.
Well, there's no good answer for that. It's not like Lot is not shown to be a good person in this story.
Yeah.
And yet
Like
still
that,
God said,
It's the
"Hurry up
opposite.
and go. I'm going to save you."
yeah. And so God's saving work here is not for Lot's sake, it's for Abraham's sake.
Yeah. Because Abraham, because he was blessed, that covers Lot.
Well, no, it's because Abraham is God's friend, and so God is looking out for Abraham's family.
Okay.
So that's the easiest way to explain this. The part of hospitality in these cultures is also, if somebody comes into your house, you do everything you can to defend them because they are your
Mhm.
guest. So that's part of what binds Lot to defend these men. He doesn't know they're angels. He doesn't know the power that these guys have, but he is bound to their defense. And
Even at the cost of sacrificing his own daughters.
yeah, and this is where the Bible gets uncomfortable to modern culture, because daughters are not as valuable in ancient cultures
For
as
women.
sons and men. That's not like great, but that is part of the tension that ancient cultures lived in, and we in our modern cultures, we have to recognize that. We don't need to continue that trend, but we need to understand, like, yeah, these daughters are not as valuable culturally as Lot's honor to defend his guests, which is not great. Like, I don't like that. I don't like saying those words. I couldn't
kind of
imagine
like
doing that
Adam
to
and
my
Eve.
children. What's that?
It's kind of like Adam and Eve. Eve talked Adam into the fruit. So it's kind of like a punishment to all women from then on.
Oh,
Not really
I'm not
necessarily,
going to make that conclusion.
Yeah. But I mean, kind of in a similar type of a situation that women are more or less.
Well, yeah, there's a definite
I've lived in that
patriarchy.
culture, so
Yeah, there's a definite patriarchy and patriarchal society. Men are more valuable than women in ancient worlds. And so Lot is a product of the ancient world.
yeah.
So even cultures that would not have ascribed to Adam and Eve, like Babylonian culture, they didn't have Adam and Eve as foundational characters, but they would have had the same attitude towards
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
Just, yeah. Again, I don't like saying it. It makes me feel terrible, but it's the way of the ancient world. So
I got a question. So Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, yeah, it was a wicked place, but this destruction really, where I should say, they only talk about it before destroying it here in terms of sexual immortality, homosexual and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Is it can we say that was the main reason why they destroyed it? Why God destroyed it? Was that the main reason? Or
So let me, like, your question is, from this text, would we say homosexuality is the main reason God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah?
yeah, is that the teaching here? Is that this is so bad that it is just you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. And the way that we are introduced to God's judgment on Sodom is the outcry against Sodom has come before me. So, like, before this act is even happening to the angels, God is already receiving an outcry about Sodom. So, like, this is one thing that Sodom does. We don't know how terrible Sodom is. So, like, you can argue, like, well, it is homosexuality is what they're doing here. This is a terrible thing that they're doing. So this is why God is bringing this destruction, because that's the only, like, clear sin that we see. But there are, and this I'll include this in my notes. There is quite a bit about Sodom and their wickedness throughout the Bible that is more than homosexuality. And so in
Yeah, I was skipping through, and I did the easy way. I did a search, and they mentioned some other stuff, but even during the search, there was a lot about sexual immorality. Yeah, in many of the searches going through. So that's why I'm asking the question, you know.
Yeah, so it is definitely a part of it. And when Jesus talks about it, when he's talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, I'm just going to quote, this is from Tremper Longman's commentary on Genesis. It says, in the Gospels, Jesus says that those cities that do not show hospitality to his disciples are worse than Sodom and Gomorrah, suggesting that it was the lack of hospitality that we are to locate the sin of those cities. And so that's in Matthew 10 and Luke 10. There's one passage that names Sodom and Gomorrah as sexual perversion. Jude warns his readers about sexual transgressions, the false teachers who are leading them astray and comparing them to Sodom and Gomorrah and surrounding towns. They serve as an example to those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. But even here, the sexual morality could be the act of, like, gang rape, and not necessarily just homosexuality. Like, because one of the things that is happening here is, like, all the men of Sodom are coming to these two men. Like, this is, like, these are not, like, gay guys, right? These are people who are trying to abuse people. And so that's part of what's going on. Like, they are acting in a homosexual behavior, in a way of expressing dominance to the foreigner that is visiting them. So there's layer upon layer of terrible abuse and destruction. And so, yeah, sexual perversion is a part of what's going on with Sodom and Gomorrah, and Sodom in particular, because we don't know what was going on in Gomorrah. Like, they were just close cities. So we are, it's a part of it, but there's the way Jesus talks about it, there's more to it than that. Like, the lack of hospitality, the lack of care for people in need, that's all part of it also. So does that make sense?
Yeah. It does.
Yeah. I mean, this is a weird story.
But it is that's what I was saying. It's really weird. It is strange.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's this city is, like, Abraham fought for them, and then they're also terrible. So we are introduced to them in, like, a compressed little section of scripture. And there's more to the city than we could ever know.
Yeah.
But what we see here, they're just bad. They're just a bad group of people. So
Jason, this is Carrie again. I got another question.
Okay.
If you have time. It just seems like this is kind of parallel. Like when you read the end, when the daughters decide to be with the father, it's almost like a repeat of after Noah.
Yes. Yes. I did not mention that. That is good catch. There is
It's
a
weird. They think they need to inter family keep going the bloodline.
right. So the Noah echo is a son who's making fun of his father in his vulnerability, right? This is daughters who are taking advantage of their father, for their own benefit. So like there is some echoing happening. It is not like a totally parallel event because the other two sons like cover over Noah's shame. And so this is so there are good catch on the echoes between the two stories. But there's contrast that's happening as well.
It just seems like the same thing all over again. Like it didn't obliterate that. It just, it's like a Band-Aid. Okay, we wiped that off the earth, but it just kept going somewhere else.
Oh, Carrie, you just nailed the whole point of Genesis for us. Is to honestly, like this is the point. Humanity is a mess. Like that is what Genesis is really telling us, like over and over again. Humanity is a mess. There is a thread line throughout history, though, of God's plan to redeem humanity from the mess. And so that's what we're getting to here with Abraham. So next week, we're gonna see the promise fulfilled. Like the child will be born, and the nation of Israel is going to start to form, all part of God's promise, all part of God's plan to redeem humanity. But the writer is telling us all the story of the origin of the nations and of the people to help us remember we're a mess and we need God to save us. Like that is the point of Genesis. So so it's a great book. There's so much good stuff in this book. And when we read it saying we need God is the hero, then it makes much more sense because you look at stories in the patriarchs, Abraham's family, descendants, they're not great people. There's a lot of messed up stuff that's going to happen, but God still rescues broken people. It's God who is the hero. Abraham does the best he can, but he's not perfect. But God is still at work. So, all right. I have maybe if there's any more questions, I do need to wrap up shortly. But are you waving, Chris, or is that a question?
I'm waving goodbye.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, let's wrap it up. And we will have book by book next week. It's the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And so I don't know, technically we're not really supposed to be doing anything extracurricular with family and stuff, but we will meet. So, because I'm here by myself. So, all right. So I'll see you guys later, and God bless. And so next week, let me give you a heads up on what we're reading next week is 20 through 23. So those chapters, and so have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Bye, Jason.
Blessings to you, Jason.
Blessings.
Guys,
We'll see you later.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.